sure everybody's clear that the POB rating was across all counties in the state.
Right.
And for that matter, not the whole country, but because or Moody rather, did not initially understand how POBs were funded or secured, and now they do. And so they're going around and actually dropping everybody by 2 notches, not just Contra Costa County. And it's just on POBs, not the overall county's rating. So I don't know if it's going to affect our ability to issue debt in other areas, but we don't have plans to issue more in POBs, that's for sure, or even to refinance it.
But the larger scope of this, which is, I think is John's excellent point, and that was also Moody, is that this is looking at what's really gone on with the funding in this county. Because in fact, if we should be paying much more for pensions, that's going to sap everything from services that I believe your calculations or your comment was that all of the amount that comes in from property taxes could be going to paying for these bonds, to paying for the pension expenses when they're misstated. So all of that will have an impact on the viability of the county's finances.
Let me respond real quick
please.
to the pension bond
Right.
issue. In 2002, Mendocino sold some pension bonds, and that's when I was, what are they doing? You know, that's really the thing that got me first interested. The chief executive was on the radio being interviewed, and the woman doing the interview said, gosh, the debt really went up over 1 year. You know, it went up $100 million. What's that about? And the CEO's response was, boy, I tell you what, this Board of Supervisors deserves a lot of credit. Because what they did is they were paying 8% interest and they lowered it to 4%. So they have saved the county hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, it's a good thing to cut your interest expense from 8% to 4%. But why do we have any interest expense at all? Why are we in debt? That's the question that was never asked. Yeah, it's a good idea to cut your interest expense, but why are you in debt? That was what was never explained. Why do you have that debt? It's because the true expense of pensions was never reported.
Mr. Olson, you were next, I think.
Yeah, hi, Dick Olson. So what do we do? That's the $64 question. Chris and I, a couple years ago, were at a presentation, an all-day presentation called Public Pension Basics or Boot Camp. Yeah, and contrary to the assertions of the unions and the rest, a very knowledgeable attorney, a partner at Myers-Nave named Eddie Kreisberg, said that, hey, you know, you're only obligated at the end of the current MOU to pay whatever you've agreed to pay, say 3% of 50 for firefighters and police officers, and after that, you know, you can change. And he said that's never been litigated. He said, but I think it's pretty close to slam dunk that you know that whatever you put aside for Jane for the first 16 years, hey, that's what you owe her. But from years 16 through 30, you can put in a different plan, and really, as a consequence, cut down any future unfunded liability while you whittle away on what you've already accrued. Does any of that make sense?
Yeah, a professor, I believe, a law professor, and I think she was at the University of Minnesota, published a study this summer about the California rule.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The California, 13 states subscribe in various ways to the California rule, California being one of them. The other states don't. The California rule says, supposedly, that there's a state constitutional right and a state court created right that once you take a job for a government, for the rest of your employment, they cannot reduce the value of your retirement benefit. They can change it around, but if they take something away here, they got to give you something there. Now they can cut your salary. They can let you go. They can change all kinds of other types of benefits, but they can't change that. So that a kid 20 years old who goes to work for the roads department has that deal till he's 60 when he retires.
Or until they die.
And you can't supposedly change that. That, what people who are paying attention to it, that issue is the best chance now for that issue to, and it has not really been litigated.
Right.
There's a lot of people who say, oh, no, it's a done deal, that's how it is, but it really hasn't been challenged. It's quite likely to be challenged in the federal bankruptcy of the city of San Bernardino. And one of the things that's happening with that bankruptcy is that for the first time, CalPERS, the gorilla in the room, all of a sudden has another gorilla in the room, and it's called the bond industry. And San Bernardino and Stockton have announced that part of their plan to get out of bankruptcy is to walk away from their pension bonds. That's one of the reasons why Moody's is doing this.
Exactly.
Okay? And the bond insurers have come into the bankruptcy court and say, "Bull, you know, why is CalPERS, why is that creditor any different than the people we represent?" And that's a battle of titans. That has to be confronted. I'm convinced that if we can't deal, not just with the stuff going forward, what they earn, I think the debt's too big already. I think the debt we have is too big. It's like a forest fire. It's growing so fast it's creating its own burn. It's so unfunded. It's growing at that target rate of return, the unfunded part. And I don't think in a lot of places we're going to keep up with it. I think we have to adjust the debt we have. Now, I would encourage you to look at what a woman named Gina Raimondo did in Rhode Island. She was extremely bright lady, owned a venture capital firm, Democrat, lifelong Democrat, ran for state treasurer, and in the first 12 months of her being in office, she passed by far, she drove the most extensive pension reform in this country, period. And one of the things they did, and they were in really bad shape in Rhode Island, and incidentally, Rhode Island is the same physical size and population of Contra Costa County, but it has 2 U.S. senators. So it's a different situation. One of the things they did is they made cost of living adjustments contingent on the funding position of the pension funds and how well the pension fund investments were doing. So rather than this automatic, whatever the CPI is, it's now a function of how well the pension fund is doing. And so that's a self-correcting mechanism. They don't expect any cost of living adjustments for the next 15 years, except the legislature wrote in that at least once every 5 years. That alone cut their unfunded pension liability 20 to 25%. That did. And I think that's the kind of thing, I think that kind of stuff has to happen, and the California rule has to be confronted. Yes, sir.
When you're saying if they walk away from the bond is from a private New York Wall Street, isn't it? The bond is from Wall Street or something? The
Yeah.
bond,
Sure.
if they walk away from the bond and when they're bankrupt, will the judge release that and they take it in the rear end? The
Federal
bond
bankruptcy
company?
works really different than what we're used to in the private sector, either individual or corporate. And I'm not, and there's only been like 400 of them since the Great Depression, so there's not a lot of case law. My impression is that unlike in private sector bankruptcies, where bankruptcy judges have a lot of ability to go in and restructure things, my impression is bankruptcy judges in municipal bankruptcies kind of just have to either agree or not agree with what the city or the county says they're going to do. So the judges have a lot less power to change the financial situation. So I think they're in kind of a take it or leave it position.
Do they have a claim on the county property? Do they come and take the city county
It depends
building
on
or
how the
something?
pension bonds were issued, but they're usually just general obligation. I believe that's right. They're not secured by.
Yeah, they're not secured.
Well,
Yeah.
one thing you need.
That's as far as I can get in here.
The bonds are not owned by a Wall Street firm. They may have issued them, but they are actually in individual bond portfolios, whether it's an individual, a retirement system, corporate or whatever, but they're individually owned.
Or private pension
A
plans.
lot of,
You know, private pension plans too.
That would be
and
the
Mendocino
wonderful.
County sold,
Whirlwind
my
thing.
understanding is Mendocino County sold one of its pension bond issues overseas in order to avoid certain security and exchange requirements.
Oh, dear.
All right,
Interesting.
Yes, ma'am.
So, there are many who would blame the elected officials, mostly of the past, for this problem that we have overall, this big problem. And my question to you is, does the improved reporting, the changes in GASB, maybe a little bit of additional pressure from Moody on the local governments or state governments for that matter, any of them, do you think that will have an impact on the ability for those elected officials to stop negotiating higher and higher and higher benefits that realistically are not being funded properly or haven't been funded properly in the past?
It's a complex issue, it's a complex answer, but my answer is yes. I think it's going to make a difference. But one of the biggest things that I think needs to happen that has not happened is we need far more effective ways for the public to hold public officials accountable. People have not,
They already
You know,
are, to the unions.
well,
Yeah.
I'm a
Yeah.
lifelong Democrat, and I think the unions have too much power. And I think they've got too much dominant power in my party. And I think it's obligation of people in my party who understand that 1 + 1 = 2 is not a political statement.
Oh, that's good.
It's incumbent on us to create a countervailing force. But it has, unfortunately, you know, I think the reality is the unions carry a big hammer and they use it. And I think they make public officials afraid because that's the power they have. I think public officials need to get afraid about another set of people. I really do. And I'm afraid that's what I think the situation is. Yes, sir.
Have you made this presentation to any of the board of supervisors of those counties and/or the unions who keep claiming all this stuff is false?
Well, I just produced the Moody's report last month. And it was published by, I put it on my website and I've got about, and incidentally, if anybody'd like to sign up, I do a monthly newsletter online. And so I got about 1,500 people who are subscribed and, I provide that to them. But a group called the Public Policy Center of California, or the California there's about 6 of them that all have the same words, they just change around. Published it, and it's kind of gone viral. All of a sudden, people from all over the place are calling me and asking me about that stuff. I am next week giving a presentation to supposedly 200 people in Marin County, and I'm told that a couple of supervisors are going to be there. 12 city council people have signed up for it. There's going to be a lot of union folks there. And I'm scheduled to do one in Sonoma County. They're arranging in Orange County for me to go down there and do that, and perhaps with some of the Orange County officials. So I suspect, my sense is that they haven't, my observation is that local governments haven't focused on what these numbers are going to look like.
Is
And
there
I
a
think when
fiduciary
they do,
responsibility for anybody in the board or the retirement board, or, they've been, and the other thing that's amazing about this is that this is not just, 1 or 2 people who have mismanaged their finances. This is all over the entire country.
John, thank you very much for allowing us to be one of the first to hear your presentation. Very enlightening.
Thank you.
Reporting requirements that are coming up. Do you think these might get deferred? Is there any possibility politically that this reporting gets put off or deferred?
yeah, I hear a lot of rumors about that, and a lot of suppositions that when governments really finally start to calculate what this is going to do, there's going to be that kind of political pressure. And I participated in the Gatsby process of developing these. I did comment letters, I attended group meetings